It's roughly 1.9 million years ago. You're crouched over a dead animal on the African savannah and starving. Your stomach demands fuel faster than found. The meat is raw, stringy, barely chewable. Your jaw aches just looking at it. No seasoning, no fire, no different idea. You rip into it anyway. That's survival before another option existed. And now look at you. Tonight you'll open an app, scroll through 40 restaurants you'll never order, settle on tacos, complain delivery is slow. Between starving Savannah and you yelling, something happened somewhere. Someone looked at raw food differently. They thought there has to be a better way. And they were right. So who was it? The first human to change food with fire? Not by accident. Not from wildfire roasting nearby. The first who decided to combine flame and meat.
By the end of this video, you'll understand why that decision matters, more than the wheel, writing, or language. Here's the obvious answer. Early humans discovered fire. Someone dropped meat in it. It tasted better, cooking was born. Simple, clean, done. But that story falls apart. The timeline doesn't line up. Archaeology tells a weirder story.
The first cooked meal is debated. It might not even be meat. It might be unexpected. To understand, go back before fire, back to when ancestors' bodies changed. Changes make sense only if cooking started. Let's talk about what the evidence actually shows, because it's stranger than you'd think. The oldest confirmed evidence of controlled fire use comes from a site called Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, dating back roughly 1 million years. Archaeologists found burned bone fragments and ashed plant remains deep inside the cave, far from any spot where a wildfire could have reached naturally. That's not an accident. That's someone carrying fire inside and keeping it going. But here's the problem. 1 million years ago, we weren't Homo sapiens yet. That was Homo erectus, a species with a smaller brain than ours, and, according to the fossil record, a body that had already started changing in a very specific way. Their teeth were smaller, their jaws were weaker, their guts were shrinking. And those changes don't make sense for a species eating raw food. This is where anthropologist Richard Wrangham's cooking hypothesis comes in. It's one of the more unsettling ideas in evolutionary biology. Wrangham argued that cooking isn't something humans started doing once we got smart. Cooking is what made us smart in the first place. Raw food takes enormous energy to digest. Chewing alone can take hours a day. Cooking breaks down fibers and proteins before they enter your mouth, which means your body suddenly spends far less energy on digestion.
Far more energy is freed up for something else, like growing a bigger brain. The numbers back this up in an uncomfortable way. The human gut is roughly 60% smaller than you'd expect for a primate our size, while our brains are roughly 3 times larger than a chimpanzee's. That trade-off, smaller gut, bigger brain, only works energetically if a massive amount of extra calories is coming from somewhere. Cooked food is the only candidate that fits the math. But here's the catch that should be sitting in your head right now. If cooking shaped our bodies 1 million years ago or more, why is the direct archaeological evidence so much harder to find that far back? Actual hearths, actual cooked bone are rare. The answer is brutally simple. Fire leaves almost nothing behind. Ash blows away. Charcoal disintegrates. 1 million years of rain, wind, and shifting soil erases nearly everything except the rare, lucky, deeply buried site like Wonderwork.
So the absence of older evidence doesn't mean cooking started later. It might just mean we haven't found the proof yet. And the body itself, your body, sitting right now with a gut too small to survive on raw food alone, might be the oldest evidence there is. So if cooking is older than the evidence, the next question becomes obvious. What did that first meal actually look like? And here's where the story gets genuinely surprising. Because the popular image, some triumphant hunter roasting a fresh kill over a fire, is probably wrong. Or at least, it's probably not the whole story. Theory number one points to something far less glamorous: roots and tubers. Early human ancestors living on the African savannah had access to underground storage organs, things like wild yams and tiger nuts, that were abundant, available year round, and almost impossible to digest raw. These plants are packed with starch, locked inside tough cellular walls that the human digestive system simply cannot break open without help. Cooking changes everything. Heat ruptures those walls, converts the starch into something your gut can actually absorb, and suddenly, a food that was barely worth the effort becomes a serious calorie source. Some researchers studying early hominid teeth have found wear patterns consistent with a diet heavy in these starchy, fibrous plants, not fresh meat. Which means the first thing anyone ever cooked on purpose might have been something closer to a primitive baked potato than a steak. Theory number two brings meat back into the picture, but not in the way you'd expect. Early humans weren't necessarily skilled hunters. For a long stretch of our evolutionary history, we were scavengers, following large predators and picking through what they left behind. That meant access to bones still packed with marrow and connective tissue, tough, sinewy scraps that would have been nearly impossible to chew raw. Heat changes the structure of collagen, turning rigid tissue into something soft enough to actually eat. And it can crack open bone in a way that makes marrow, one of the most calorie dense substances available in nature, far easier to extract. So the first deliberately cooked meal might have been something almost nobody pictures: a scavenged, half rotted limb made edible only because someone figured out that heat could rescue it. The real answer is probably both, depending on what was around that day. Tubers when meat wasn't available, scavenged bone and tissue when it was. What matters isn't which specific food came first. What matters is the moment something clicked, the moment an ancestor of ours realized that fire didn't just keep you warm, it could transform food itself, take something tough, dangerous, or barely worth eating, and turn it into fuel. That single realization didn't just change dinner, it rewired the entire trajectory of the human body and everything that came after: the bigger brains, the smaller guts, the surplus energy that eventually built civilization, traces back to someone, somewhere, deciding to put something they shouldn't have been able to eat directly into the flames. Once cooking became routine, something happened that had nothing to do with nutrition and everything to do with what it means to be human. Cooking takes time. Raw food, you can eat the moment you find it, alone, on the move, no waiting required. Cooked food forces a pause. Someone has to tend the fire, someone has to wait for the meat to soften or the root to cook through, and that waiting created something new in human history: the meal. A fixed point in the day where people gathered, sat still together, and shared.
Anthropologists believe this shared mealtime around fire was one of the earliest forms of sustained social bonding our species ever developed. The foundation for division of labor, for family structure, for the basic idea that food isn't just fuel, it's something you experience with other people. The communal dinner table, the thing you might be sitting at tonight, has a direct, unbroken line back to a fire on the savannah nearly 2 million years ago. But here's the uncomfortable twist. That same drive, the human craving for energy dense, easily digestible, intensely flavorful food, didn't stay innocent. It became something the modern food industry learned to weaponize. The exact biological instincts that once helped a starving ancestor recognize a calorie rich meal as worth pursuing are the same instincts triggered, deliberately and scientifically, by hyper processed food engineered to override your sense of fullness.
Food scientists today study the same fat, salt, and sugar combinations our ancestors evolved to crave, and use that knowledge to build products designed to be eaten past the point of hunger. The cooking fire that once required real effort, real patience, real community has been replaced by a drive-through window and a notification on your phone. What took our ancestors hundreds of thousands of years to refine into ritual, modern industry compressed into a transaction that takes 90 seconds and leaves you wanting more on purpose. So tonight, when you eat dinner, whatever it is, however it arrived, you're participating in something that started with a half-starved ancestor staring at a tough root or a scavenged bone and making a decision nobody had ever made before. The fire changed. The food changed beyond recognition.
But the basic act, transforming raw material into something your body can use, sitting down, sharing it, hasn't gone anywhere. It's the oldest habit you have, older than language, older than tools, arguably older than being fully human at all. So here's the question. If you had to guess, what do you think that very first cooked meal actually was? Root? Marrow? Something else entirely? Let me know in the comments.